Cyrith was young for a historian. Among her people, the Velkari, most scholars waited until their scales turned silver before they dared to ask difficult questions. But Cyrith had never been patient. She had spent her entire life staring at star maps, and she had noticed something that nobody wanted to talk about. There was a hole in the galaxy. Not a real hole, of course. The stars were still there. Millions of them, spread across a vast region of space that should have been filled with trade routes, colonies, and thriving civilizations. Instead, every map in the Galactic Confederacy showed the same thing: a dark circle, a blank space, and 3 words that made even the bravest admirals look away. Do not enter. Cyrith had asked her teachers about it when she was young. They had changed the subject. She had asked her parents, and they had told her to focus on her studies. She had searched the public archives and found nothing. It was as if an entire section of the galaxy had been erased from history. Today, she stood before the Galactic Assembly and demanded answers. The assembly hall was enormous. Representatives from dozens of species sat in curved rows that rose toward a ceiling so high it was lost in shadow. The Chakra clicked their mandibles nervously. The Delvians floated in their water tanks, their tentacles pressed against the glass. The ancient Orun sat perfectly still, their stone-like faces showing no emotion. Cyrith felt very small standing in the center of the hall. But she had not come this far to stay silent. "I request permission to study Sector 7 Gamma," she said. Her voice echoed in the vast space. "The region marked as forbidden on all our maps. I want to know what happened there. I want to know why we avoid it." The reaction was immediate. Delegates began shouting. Some stood up from their seats. A Chakra ambassador made a sound that Cyrith had never heard before, something between a scream and a warning. The speaker of the assembly, an elderly Orun named Torvax, raised his hand for silence. The hall slowly grew quiet, but the tension remained. Cyrith could feel it like electricity in the air. "Young historian," Torvax said, his voice deep and slow. "You ask about things that are better left forgotten." "Forgotten by whom?" Cyrith replied. "I have searched every archive. I have read every public record. There is nothing. How can an entire sector of space have no history? How can billions of stars be forbidden without explanation?" Torvax closed his eyes. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he spoke to the guard standing by the door. "Take her to the Vault of Remembrance. Let Admiral Vorath decide what she should know." The guards led Cyrith through corridors she had never seen before. They went deep underground, past security checkpoints that scanned her body and her mind. Finally, they reached a door made of black metal. It had no handle, no visible lock. One of the guards pressed his hand against it, and it slid open with a soft hiss. The room beyond was dark. Cyrith stepped inside, and the door closed behind her. "So," a voice said from the shadows, "you are the one who wants to know about the humans." Cyrith's heart beat faster. She had heard that word before, but only in whispers, only in rumors that were quickly denied. "Humans?" she repeated. "What are humans?" A light flickered on, revealing an old Orun sitting in a chair. His body was covered in scars. One of his arms was mechanical, a crude replacement made of dark metal. His eyes were the color of dying stars. "My name is Vorath," he said. "I am the last admiral who fought in the war. I am the last one who remembers what we did, what they did, what we all became." He gestured for Cyrith to sit. She found a chair and lowered herself into it, her eyes never leaving the old soldier. 300 years ago, Vorath began. The Confederacy discovered a small planet in Sector 7 Gamma, a blue world with 1 moon. The creatures living there called it Earth. He pressed a button on his chair, and a holographic image appeared in the air between them. It showed a planet covered in oceans and green land. Clouds swirled across its surface. It was beautiful. The humans were young, Vorath continued. They had only recently learned to leave their world. Their technology was primitive. Their ships were slow. Their weapons were laughable compared to ours. He changed the image. Now it showed the humans themselves. They were strange creatures, soft and fragile, with no scales, no armor, no natural weapons. They walked on 2 legs and used their hands to build things. "The Confederacy saw them as useful," Vorath said. "We decided to bring them into our empire, to use them as workers, as servants. We sent a diplomatic fleet to their world and gave them a choice: join us willingly, or be conquered." Cyrith felt a chill run through her body. What did they choose? Voreth laughed, but there was no humor in it. They chose something we never expected. They chose to fight. He leaned forward in his chair, and his mechanical arm clicked softly. You must understand, young one. In all our history, no primitive species had ever resisted the Confederacy. We had conquered hundreds of worlds. We had brought dozens of species under our rule. When we showed our power, lesser races always surrendered. It was logical. It was the only sane choice. But the humans did not surrender, Cirith said. No, Voreth replied. They did not. Within days of our arrival, they stopped fighting each other. Nations that had been enemies for centuries suddenly became allies. They shared their weapons, their knowledge, their soldiers. They built new ships and new weapons faster than we thought possible. He changed the image again. This time it showed fire and destruction. Confederacy ships breaking apart in the darkness of space. Explosions lighting up the night sky above Earth. 6 months after we arrived, they attacked our fleet. They used our own technology against us. Technology they had stolen and copied and improved. They destroyed every ship we had sent. Every single one. Cirith stared at the images of burning ships. That is impossible. That is what we said, Voreth agreed. That is what the Overseer said with his dying breath. Impossible. But the humans did not care about what was possible. They only cared about survival, about freedom, about making us pay for threatening their world. He turned off the hologram, and the room fell into shadow once more. We made a terrible mistake that day, Voreth said. We saw their weakness and thought they would break easily. We did not see their strength. We did not understand what they were capable of when pushed to the edge. Cirith's voice was barely a whisper. What happened next? Voreth's scarred face twisted with old pain. We went to war, he said. A war that lasted 40 years. A war that nearly destroyed us all. A war that taught the galaxy a lesson it will never forget. He pointed toward the ceiling, toward the stars that hung invisible above them. That is why the sector is forbidden. That is why we do not speak of them. That is why no species enters human space. His voice dropped low. Because the last time we did, we learned what happens when you wake a sleeping giant, and the galaxy still carries the scars. Admiral Voreth closed his eyes and let the memories wash over him. Even after 300 years, he could still remember every detail of the day the Confederacy first arrived at Earth. He had been young then, strong, proud. He had believed that the universe belonged to the strong, and that the weak existed only to serve. He had been so foolish. It began with arrogance, he told Cirith. We sent a fleet of 50 warships to Earth, not because we needed that many, but because we wanted to impress the humans, to show them our power, to make them understand that resistance was pointless. He activated the holographic display again. Images appeared in the air, recorded footage from 2 centuries ago. Cirith watched as massive Confederacy ships emerged from faster-than-light travel and took positions around the blue planet. The leader of our fleet was a Chukra named Overseer Vryn, Voreth continued. He was experienced, clever. He had conquered 7 worlds before Earth. He knew exactly how to break the spirit of primitive species. The hologram showed Vryn standing on the bridge of his command ship. He was tall for a Chukra, with shiny black armor covering his body and 4 arms folded behind his back. His compound eyes reflected the light of Earth's sun. Vryn sent a message to every government on Earth, Voreth said. He told them that the Confederacy had claimed their world. He gave them 2 choices. They could surrender peacefully and become part of our empire. They would provide workers, soldiers, and resources. In exchange, we would protect them and share some of our technology. And the second choice? Cirith asked. War, Voreth replied. Complete destruction. Vryn made it clear that any resistance would be crushed without mercy. He showed them footage of other worlds we had conquered. Cities burning, armies destroyed, millions dead. The hologram changed to show Earth's response. Leaders from many nations appeared on screens, speaking in languages that Cirith did not understand. Their faces showed fear, anger, and confusion. We expected them to argue among themselves, Voreth said. Humans were divided into hundreds of nations that constantly fought each other. We thought they would waste time debating while we prepared our invasion. We thought some would surrender while others resisted, making it easy to defeat them piece by piece. His mechanical hand clenched into a fist. We were wrong. So very wrong. The hologram showed something remarkable. Within hours of receiving Vrin's message, human leaders began meeting. Within days, old enemies were shaking hands. Countries that had pointed weapons at each other for generations suddenly combined their forces. Scientists from rival nations started working together in secret laboratories. They called it the United Earth Defense Initiative, Vorath said. Every nation on the planet contributed what they could. Soldiers, weapons, ships, scientists, factories. They worked around the clock, sleeping in shifts, pushing themselves beyond all limits. They had 6 months before we planned to begin our occupation, and they used every single day. Sirith leaned forward. What were they building? At first, we did not know, Vorath admitted. We watched them from orbit, but we did not take them seriously. Their technology was so primitive compared to ours. We laughed at their chemical rockets and their simple computers. We thought they were wasting their time. He paused, and his old face showed something that might have been respect. But humans are not like other species. They learn fast. Faster than any race the Confederacy had ever encountered. During those 6 months, they captured small surveillance drones we had sent to observe them. They took those drones apart and studied every piece. They learned how our technology worked. And then they made it better. The hologram showed human scientists working in underground bunkers. They were surrounded by alien technology, drawing diagrams, building prototypes, testing weapons that should have taken them centuries to develop. We did not realize the danger until it was too late, Vorath said. On the day we planned to begin our occupation, Overseer Vrin received a message from Earth. It was from their leaders, all of them together. They had chosen their answer. Sirith held her breath. What did they say? They said no. The hologram shifted to show the bridge of Vrin's ship. Alarms were screaming. Officers were running in all directions. Through the windows, Sirith could see fire and chaos. They called it Operation Prometheus, Vorath said. The humans attacked us all at once, using weapons we did not know they had. First, they sent a virus into our computer systems. Every ship in our fleet lost control at the same moment. Engines failed. Weapons went offline. Communication systems went dark. His voice grew heavy with old grief. Then came the missiles. Thousands of them. The humans had taken their nuclear weapons and attached crude faster-than-light drives to them. Technology they had copied from our drones and modified. The missiles appeared inside our fleet, too close for our defenses to stop them. The hologram showed the destruction. One by one, Confederacy ships exploded in brilliant flashes of light. The darkness of space became bright with fire. In less than an hour, the entire fleet was destroyed. 50 ships, Vorath said. 30,000 soldiers, all gone. Overseer Vrin's last transmission was a single word. Impossible. Then his ship broke apart, and he was gone. Sirith sat in silence, trying to understand what she had just seen. A primitive species, barely capable of space travel, had destroyed an entire Confederacy fleet. It should not have been possible. The mathematics did not make sense. The news spread across the galaxy like wildfire, Vorath continued. Species that had lived under Confederacy rule for centuries heard about the humans. Some felt hope for the first time in generations. Others felt fear. But the leaders of the Confederacy felt only one thing: rage. He stood up slowly, his old joints creaking. He walked to a window that looked out into darkness. We could have learned from our mistake. We could have left the humans alone. We could have accepted that some species are not meant to be conquered. But we were too proud, too angry. We refused to accept that primitives had defeated us. He turned back to face Sirith. The High Council met in emergency session. They debated for 3 days. Some argued for peace. They said the humans had proven themselves worthy of respect. They said we should recognize their independence and leave them alone. What did the others say? Sirith asked. Vorath's face darkened. The others demanded blood. They said the humans had to be punished. They said that if we allowed one species to resist us, others would follow. They said the Confederacy would collapse if we showed weakness. He returned to his chair and sat down heavily. In the end, the war faction won. The High Council declared total war against humanity. They assembled the largest fleet in Confederacy history. 12,000 warships from 9 different species, the most powerful force the galaxy had ever seen. His voice dropped to a whisper. They thought it would take weeks to crush the humans. They thought Earth would burn quickly, and then everything would return to normal. They had no idea what they were starting. No idea how much it would cost. No idea that they were about to create the greatest enemy the galaxy had ever known. He looked at Cyrith with eyes that held centuries of pain. The war lasted 40 years. And by the end, we had all become monsters. The war began with fire falling from the sky. 12,000 Confederacy warships surrounded Earth, blocking out the stars. They came from every corner of the galaxy, carrying soldiers from 9 different species. The Chakra brought their swarm warriors, millions of insectoid fighters that could survive in the vacuum of space. The Delvians brought their water ships, massive vessels filled with their aquatic crews. The Orun brought their heavy cruisers, covered in armor thick enough to survive nuclear explosions. Admiral Vorath had commanded one of those ships. He remembered standing on his bridge, looking down at the blue planet below, and feeling certain that victory would be easy. "We began by destroying their military bases," he told Cyrith. "We fired from orbit, burning their armies from existence. We targeted their factories, their power stations, their communication networks. In the first week, we killed 50 million humans." He paused, and his mechanical hand trembled slightly. "We expected them to surrender. Every other species had surrendered when faced with such destruction, but the humans refused. They hid in bunkers underground. They moved their factories into caves and tunnels. They kept fighting, even as their cities turned to ash." The hologram showed images of the early war. Human cities burning, missiles streaking through the sky, soldiers in simple armor fighting against aliens with technology far beyond their own. "We sent our armies to the surface," Vorath continued. "We thought it would be simple. Our soldiers were stronger, faster, better equipped. One Chekra warrior could kill 10 human soldiers in open combat. One Oruan could survive weapons that would destroy a human completely. But it was not simple," Cyrith guessed. "No," Vorath agreed. "The humans did not fight in the open. They hid in ruins and ambushed our patrols. They set traps that killed hundreds of soldiers at once. They attacked at night, when our species could not see well. They poisoned water supplies and contaminated food stores. They made us pay for every building, every street, every single step forward." He changed the hologram to show a different scene. Confederacy soldiers walking through a destroyed city. Suddenly, explosions erupted all around them. Buildings collapsed. The ground itself opened up and swallowed them. "They were clever," Vorath said. "So terribly clever. They learned our weaknesses faster than we could adapt. The Chakra were vulnerable to certain sound frequencies, so the humans built weapons that shattered their armor with noise. The Delvians needed water to survive, so the humans contaminated every water source on the planet. The Orun could not handle high temperatures, so the humans used fire against them constantly." Cyrith watched the images of battle with growing horror. She had never seen anything like this. In all the history she had studied, war had always been clean and quick. The strong conquered the weak, and then peace returned. This was something different. This was endless, brutal, and filled with hate. "The humans had a leader," Vorath said. "A woman named Kira Vasquez. She had been a naval officer before the war, commanding a small patrol ship. When the invasion began, she took command of what remained of Earth's fleet and led the resistance." The hologram showed a woman with dark hair and fierce eyes. She wore a military uniform covered in burn marks and bloodstains. Her face was thin and tired, but her expression showed no fear. "Vasquez understood something that we did not," Vorath said. "She knew the humans could not win a conventional war. We had more ships, more soldiers, more resources. If the war continued as it was, humanity would eventually be destroyed." "So what did she do?" Cyrith asked. Vorath's voice became heavy. "She changed the rules." The hologram shifted to show a recording of Vasquez addressing her troops. Her voice was calm, but her words were terrifying. She announced what she called the doctrine of mutually assured annihilation, Vorath explained. The humans had been building something in secret. Thousands of missiles, hidden in asteroid fields and abandoned space stations throughout the solar system. Each missile carried a powerful warhead. Each one was programmed with the coordinates of a Confederacy homeworld. Cyrith felt her blood turn cold. "They threatened your planets. More than threatened," Vorath said. Vasquez sent a message to the High Council. She told them that for every human world destroyed, humanity would destroy 10 Confederacy worlds. She said the missiles were already in position. She said nothing could stop them. The hologram showed the faces of Confederacy leaders as they received the message. They looked shocked, angry, and afraid. We did not believe her at first, Vorath admitted. We thought it was a bluff. The humans did not have the technology to build weapons that could reach our homeworlds. It was impossible. He closed his eyes. So we tested them. We destroyed Earth's moon. The hologram showed the moon breaking apart, massive chunks of rock tumbling through space. The destruction was complete and terrible. It was meant to be a warning, Vorath said. A demonstration of our power. We expected the humans to see it and finally surrender. He opened his eyes, and Cyrith saw pain there that went beyond anything she had ever known. Instead, 3 Chakra colony worlds exploded. 30 million dead. In a single hour, Cyrith could not speak. She could only stare at the hologram as it showed the destruction. Beautiful planets, covered in cities and farms and families, suddenly engulfed in fire. The missiles had traveled faster than anyone thought possible. They had appeared without warning and detonated before anyone could react. The humans had not been bluffing, Vorath said. They had been preparing for years, building their missiles in secret, hiding them in places we would never think to look. And they had made a choice that no other species had ever made. What choice? Cyrith whispered. They chose spite, Vorath replied. They decided that if they could not survive, then neither would we. They made themselves so dangerous, so costly to destroy, that killing them would mean killing ourselves. The hologram showed more battles, more destruction, more death. Years passed in moments. Cyrith watched as the war spread across space, as both sides lost more and more. As the galaxy burned, the other species began to doubt, Vorath said. The Delvians had lost their sacred spawning worlds. The Chakra queens refused to send more soldiers to die. The Orun watched their oldest colonies burn, and began to question whether victory was worth the price. He stood up and walked to a cabinet in the corner of the room. He opened it and pulled out a small object. It was a human weapon, a simple metal device that fit in his hand. I took this from a dead human soldier, he said. She was young, barely an adult by their standards. She had fought for 3 days without sleep, killing 17 of my warriors before we finally brought her down. And do you know what she did as she died? Cyrith shook her head. She laughed, Vorath said. She laughed and told me that 10 of my people would die for every one of hers. She told me that we had already lost. She told me that humans never surrender. He placed the weapon back in the cabinet and closed the door. That was when I began to understand, he said. We were not fighting an army. We were not fighting a nation. We were fighting a species that had decided to make war their entire existence. A species that would rather die than kneel. A species that had turned their own destruction into a weapon. He turned back to face Cyrith, and the worst part? They were right. By the 30th year of the war, we had technically won. Earth was a radioactive wasteland. Most of humanity was dead. But the Confederacy was dying too, and we both knew that if we continued, there would be nothing left. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. That was when everything changed. By the 30th year of the war, the galaxy had become a graveyard. Admiral Vorath stood at the window of the Vault of Remembrance, staring into the darkness. His voice was tired, heavy with memories he had carried for 3 centuries. We had won, he said. At least, that is what the High Council told us. Earth was destroyed. Their cities were gone. Their armies were scattered. Out of 12 billion humans, only 800 million remained. They lived in hidden stations, in hollowed-out asteroids, in the dark spaces between stars. He turned to face Cyrith, and she saw the weight of those years in his eyes. But victory felt like defeat. The Confederacy had lost 2,000 warships. Hundreds of colonies had been destroyed. Entire species were on the edge of extinction. The Delvians had lost so many spawning worlds that their population was collapsing. The Chakra queens had begun fighting among themselves, blaming each other for the disaster. The Orun had become silent and withdrawn, ashamed of what we had done. Cyrith listened without speaking. She was beginning to understand something terrible. This was not a story of heroes and villains. This was a story of 2 civilizations that had destroyed each other, and neither side could claim victory. The humans should have been finished, Vorath continued. They had lost everything. Their homeworld, their population, their future. Any other species would have given up. Any other species would have accepted defeat and begged for mercy. He laughed. but it was a bitter sound. But Admiral Vasquez was still alive, and she was not done fighting. The hologram activated, showing a battle that had taken place near the end of the war. Cyrith saw a massive Confederacy fleet moving through space. Hundreds of ships, carrying enough supplies to continue the war for years. This was the Battle of Kethvor, Voreth said. The supply fleet was the largest we had assembled since the beginning of the war. Food, weapons, fuel, medical supplies, everything the Confederacy needed to finish what we had started. If the fleet reached our main forces, the war would continue for another decade. The hologram shifted to show something else. A small group of human ships, barely visible against the stars. There were only 12 of them. Old vessels covered in battle scars and emergency repairs. Vasquez found us, Voreth said. I do not know how. Our route was secret. Our communications were encrypted. But somehow, she knew exactly where we would be, and exactly when we would arrive. Cyrith counted the ships on both sides. The Confederacy had over 600 vessels. The humans had 12. The mathematics were clear. This was not a battle. This was suicide. We laughed when we saw them, Voreth admitted. We actually laughed. 12 ships against 600. We thought Vasquez had finally lost her mind. We thought this was the desperate act of a dying enemy. He paused, and his mechanical hand gripped the edge of his chair. We stopped laughing very quickly. The hologram showed the battle beginning. The human ships did not slow down. They did not form defensive positions. They did not fire their weapons. Instead, they accelerated, faster and faster, heading directly toward the center of the Confederacy fleet. It took us too long to understand, Voreth said. By the time we realized what Vasquez was doing, it was too late. The human ships hit the Confederacy formation at maximum speed. They did not try to avoid the enemy vessels. They aimed for them. 12 ships turned themselves into missiles, crashing into the largest supply transports with all the force their engines could produce. The explosions were massive. Each human ship carried extra fuel tanks and explosive materials. When they hit, they created fireballs that consumed everything around them. Supply transports broke apart. Escort vessels were thrown aside. The entire fleet fell into chaos. Admiral Vasquez was on the lead ship, Voreth said. The last transmission we received from her came just before impact. It was a single sentence. His voice cracked slightly. She said, "We are not a species that knows how to kneel." The hologram showed the aftermath. The Confederacy supply fleet was destroyed. 600 ships, reduced to debris floating in the void. Years of supplies, gone in moments. And at the center of the destruction, the twisted remains of 12 human vessels. Cyrith felt tears forming in her eyes. She did not know if she was crying for the humans or for the Confederacy soldiers or for everyone who had died in this terrible war. Maybe she was crying for all of them. That was the end, Voreth said quietly. Not the end of the war, but the end of our will to fight. The admirals who had demanded blood looked at what had happened and finally understood the truth. What truth? Cyrith asked. That we could not win, Voreth replied. We could kill every human in the galaxy, but the cost would be everything we had. Every ship, every soldier, every world. The humans had made themselves too expensive to destroy. They had turned their own deaths into weapons, and they had shown us that they would never, ever stop fighting. He sat down heavily in his chair. The High Council met in secret. For the first time in 30 years, everyone agreed. The war had to end. We sent a message to the surviving humans and proposed a ceasefire. Did they accept? Cyrith asked. They had one condition, Voreth said. Just one. They did not ask for territory. They did not ask for compensation. They did not ask for revenge. They asked for only one thing. He looked at the dark section of the star map on the wall. They said, "Leave us alone. Forever." Cyrith understood now. She understood why the sector was forbidden. She understood why no one spoke of the humans. She understood why every species in the Confederacy avoided that region of space like it was cursed. We agreed, Voreth said. What else could we do? The war had cost us everything. We had started it thinking we would gain a servant race. Instead, we had created enemies who would haunt our nightmares for eternity. He pressed a button, and the hologram showed the signing of the peace treaty. Representatives from both sides stood in a neutral station, their faces tired and hollow. No one celebrated, no one smiled. They simply ended the killing and walked away. We withdrew from their space, Vorath said. We erased their location from public records. We forbade any contact, any communication, any travel to their sector. We tried to forget them. His voice became even quieter, but we could not forget. Every species that fought in the war carries the memory. We teach our children to fear that dark space on the map. We tell them that something terrible lives there, something that should never be disturbed. Cirith wiped her eyes. And the humans? What happened to them? Vorath was silent for a long moment. They rebuilt. Slowly, painfully, but they rebuilt. They took their scattered survivors and made new homes on new worlds. They raised new generations who had never known Earth. They created a civilization from the ashes of everything they had lost. He stood up and walked to the star map. He placed his hand on the dark sector, the forbidden zone. They are out there right now, he said, living their lives, building their futures. We have listening posts at the edge of their space. We intercept their transmissions sometimes. Do you know what we hear? Cirith shook her head. Music, Vorath said. Laughter. Children playing. They have moved on. They have healed. They have become something new. His voice broke. But we have not. We cannot. Every time we look at the stars, we remember what we did, what we awakened, what we created, and we know that if we ever threaten them again, they will do it all over. They will burn the galaxy to ash before they kneel. He turned away from the map. That is the real reason the sector is forbidden. Not because we fear what the humans might do to us, but because we are ashamed of what we did to them. Cirith sat in silence for a long time after Admiral Vorath finished speaking. The vault of remembrance felt smaller now, as if the weight of history was pressing down on the walls. She looked at the old soldier sitting across from her, and she saw not a warrior, but a broken man who had carried his guilt for 3 centuries. There is more, Vorath said finally. One last thing I must show you. The reason I agreed to speak with you today. He activated the hologram one more time. The images that appeared were different from the battle footage she had seen before. These were quieter, more personal. They showed human faces, recorded during the darkest years of the war. These are intercepted transmissions, Vorath explained. Messages sent between human soldiers during the fighting. We captured them and stored them here, in this vault, for 300 years. I have watched them, trying to understand, trying to find some answer that would make sense of what happened. The first transmission showed a young human man sitting in a damaged spaceship. His face was covered in burns, and his uniform was torn. Behind him, Cirith could see other soldiers lying on the floor, some of them clearly dead. The man spoke in a language she did not understand. Vorath pressed a button, and translated words appeared below the image. He is talking to his family, Vorath said. He knows he will not survive the next battle. He is telling his wife that he loves her. He is telling his children to be brave. He is apologizing for not being there to watch them grow up. The man finished speaking and ended the transmission. His face showed exhaustion and grief, but also something else. Determination, purpose. He knew he was going to die, but he was not going to run. The next transmission showed a group of human soldiers gathered in a small room. They were laughing and singing, passing around containers of water and small pieces of food. Some of them had bandages covering serious wounds. None of them looked like they had slept in days. This was recorded the night before a major battle, Vorath said. These soldiers knew they would be facing our forces in the morning. They knew most of them would not survive. And yet they spent their last night together, sharing songs and stories. Cirith watched as the soldiers raised their containers in a toast. They shouted something together, a phrase that repeated in several transmissions throughout the recording. What are they saying? She asked. Vorath's voice was soft. They are saying, to those who came before, and those who will come after, remember us. The hologram changed again. This transmission showed an older woman, gray hair and tired eyes, speaking directly into a camera. She was addressing the humans who would survive the war, the ones who would rebuild after everything was lost. She was a teacher before the war, Vorath said. She taught children about art and music and literature. When the invasion began, she became a medic, then a soldier, then a commander. She recorded this message during the final years of the fighting, when everyone thought humanity was doomed. The woman spoke slowly and carefully. Her words appeared on the screen as she talked. Do not become what they tried to make us. Do not let hatred be your legacy. We fight because we must. But we must never forget who we were. We were poets and painters. We were musicians and dancers. We were dreamers who looked at the stars and saw beauty instead of enemies. When this war ends, whoever survives, remember that. Remember what we were before they forced us to become warriors. She paused, and tears ran down her weathered face. Build universities instead of weapons. Write songs instead of battle plans. Raise children who know peace instead of war. That is how we win, not by destroying them, but by surviving as something better than what they made us become. The transmission ended, and the room fell silent. Cyreth could not stop her tears. She wept for the humans who had died. She wept for the billions who had lost their homes, their families, their entire world. She wept for a species that had been forced to abandon everything good about themselves just to survive. Do you understand now? Vorath asked. Do you see why we cannot forget? Do you see why the galaxy still carries this shame? Cyreth nodded slowly. They were not warriors. No, Vorath agreed. They were artists, dreamers, creators. They built monuments to peace and wrote poems about love. They wanted to explore the universe and make friends among the stars. And we destroyed that. We forced them to become something they never wanted to be. He stood up and walked to the hologram projector. He changed the image one final time. Now it showed current transmissions from human space, intercepted by Confederacy listening posts just days ago. Cyreth saw cities filled with light and color. She saw children playing in parks beneath artificial suns. She saw theaters and concert halls and libraries. She saw humans walking through streets without weapons, laughing and talking and living normal lives. They did what the teacher asked, Vorath said. They rebuilt. They created a new civilization from the ashes. They chose to be artists and dreamers again. They moved on. He turned off the hologram and faced Cyreth directly. But we cannot move on. Every species in the Confederacy remembers what we did. We teach our children about the war, but we do not teach them the truth. We tell them that humans are dangerous, that human space must be avoided, that contact with them would bring destruction. But we do not tell them why. Why don't you tell them? Cyreth asked. Vorath's scarred face twisted with emotion. Because the truth is worse than any lie. The truth is that we attacked a peaceful species for no reason except greed. The truth is that they only became dangerous because we forced them to be. The truth is that everything the galaxy fears about humans is our own creation. He walked back to his chair and sat down heavily. That is why you were brought here, young historian. That is why I have told you everything. Because the truth must not die. Someday, someone must teach the galaxy what really happened. Someone must make sure we never repeat our mistake. Cyreth stood up slowly. Her mind was filled with images and emotions she could barely process. She had come here looking for answers, and she had found them. But the answers were heavier than she had expected. What do you want me to do? She asked. Vorath looked at her with eyes that held centuries of regret. Remember, he said. Write the truth in your histories. Tell the galaxy what we did and what it cost us. Tell them about the humans who wanted only to be left alone. Tell them about the war we started and the peace they demanded. Tell them that the Forbidden Zone exists not because we fear the humans, but because we fear ourselves. He pointed toward the dark section of the star map. And if anyone ever suggests that we should enter human space again, show them this vault. Show them the recordings. Show them what happens when you force dreamers to become destroyers. Cyreth walked to the door of the vault. She paused and looked back at the old admiral one last time. Do you think they will ever forgive us? She asked. Vorath was silent for a long moment. Then he shook his head. I do not think they need to forgive us, he said. They have moved on. They have healed. They are living their lives without hatred or fear. The question is not whether they will forgive us. His voice dropped to a whisper. The question is whether we will ever forgive ourselves. Cyreth left the vault and walked through the corridors of the assembly building. She emerged into daylight and looked up at the sky. Somewhere out there, beyond the Forbidden Zone, humans were building universities and writing music and raising children who had never known war. And somewhere in every corner of the galaxy, other species looked at those same stars and remembered the cost of their arrogance. They remembered the cities they had burned, the families they had destroyed, the dreamers they had forced to become warriors. 300 years had passed, but the memory remained. No species entered human space, and the galaxy never forgot why.